Ahoy, and welcome in to another mind-expanding episode of Not Allowed to Die, your podcast about mental health treatment from the therapist perspective. I'm your host, Dan Megler, social worker and life enthusiast, and alongside me, as always, is Mariska, the two-toothed Patterdale Terrier, and she is not licking her paws. And you know what that means, you Mariskateers, you Mariskovites? It means that you are doing an excellent job of rating, reviewing, and telling a friend about the podcast, because we know when we do that, it makes Mariska's paws feel so much better. So, again, if you're getting together with people and you're having a barbecue and you might say, Joe Schmo, you're doing a great job on the grilling, but I know you could use some help with your mental health treatment goals. Maybe you should listen to Not Allowed to Die. And you don't just tell them that, you send them a link to the podcast and you tell them to follow. Mariska also wants me to remind you that we are creating this podcast in part to draw attention to Pause for Patrick. Pause for Patrick is a nonprofit organization dedicated to bringing the love of animals to people who need it the most. So if you know a young person, 30 and younger, who could benefit from having an emotional support animal, they might need help getting an ESA letter, they want to adopt from a shelter, any of those things, tell them to go to pauseforpatrick.org. Now, Mariska is particularly excited today because you guys all know how much she loves it when we have a guest. And today, we don't just have any guest, we have an extremely distinguished guest. So, Julie Merriman, PhD, LPC, CSC, is a counselor, educator, podcaster, author, speaker, and clinician with close to 30 years' experience rescuing women from the virtuous trap of self-sacrifice. She doesn't do fluff, she does survival. She's the architect of Soul Joy and author of In Pursuit of Joy and Are We Going to Have Sex or What? Dr. Jules is the voice behind the top 100 motivational podcast, Compassion Fatigue, and the host of Sexy After 50. She uses polyvagal science, somatic wisdom, and chakra psychology to melt the nervous system freeze that kills desire and fuels burnout. From her Texas ranch, Dr. Jules leads a movement of high-achieving women who are done being invisible. She bridges the gap between clinical neuroscience and raw human desire, proving that midlife isn't a decline. It's a hostile takeover of your own life. And as we all know, Mariska is a woman of, more than midlife years, so she's extra excited to learn whatever she can today. So Dr. Jules, if you can tell us a little bit about how you came to this work, I'd love to hear from you.
Well, the short story is I'm old, so just as I aged, my practice aged. But I started my career. I'm a professor also. I train folks into the field, but I started my career really working with. I'm a registered play therapist as well, so training and working with families. And then as I aged and my family's aged, it really hit me. Things look a little different when you have 20 or 30 years of allostatic load really impacting your life, stress, never stopping to fill your own cup, always pouring from your own cup. My first book is all about my burn and crash. I really was driving myself hard, not setting appropriate boundaries, not believing. Well, here's the essence of it. I figured out that I had believed that my worth was tied to the work, my production. If I wasn't serving, then I wasn't worthy. And so that really was a wake up call for me. And I started looking around at my students I've been a LPC supervisor for about 30 years. So I've, we have to have that 60-hour master's, then we're supervised for 3,000 hours. And as I watched my students and interns coming in so vivacious and bubbly, and then just being like Igor dragging their leg across the room, I thought, well, it's not just me. This is something going on with the field, if you will, with women, with high achievers, people really pushing themselves. So that's what piqued my interest. And as a professor, it's publish or perish. So that was my area of research, compassion fatigue and burnout. And then as I got older and wiser, I realized how important nervous system is. In fact, as I train counselors now, I believe that it's flat if we don't look holistically at physiology, psychology, and biology, because that all comes together, right? To as our experience in our world and working with our clients.
Yeah, all of us worship at the altar of Brene Brown. And, she says in one of her books that the idea that we can't really love other people unless we learn how to love ourselves. This idea that we are sometimes not walking our own talk. And as you train people, how often were you finding that these people that you were mentoring are giving therapy to other people about work-life balance and whatnot, and they were really struggling to have that work-life balance themselves? And for yourself, was there a point at which you were trying to keep all, being a mom, being a wife, being a friend? I don't know if you had, dealt with the idea of having older parents that I'm a caregiver for and doing those things while also sitting in this clinical office, and you're giving advice to your clients. And you like, so how, for you personally, how is that process, and what are you saying to the people you're training about that walking your talk of balance to prevent that compassion fatigue?
Well, if I'm very honest, it's probably 100%. In the beginning, before we have that self-awareness, I know I was horribly guilty of it. And I would sometimes sit in my office and almost feel like a hypocrite because I'm saying, do what I say, not what I do. And really had to have a quote unquote come to Jesus, if you will, moment with myself to say, come on, man, you cannot live like this. You cannot craft this craft if I do not take care of myself. And it really changed how I approached my life as a professor, because I really, who cares about APA? That kind of stuff when you're grading.
They'll come for you. Don't say that too loud. Anyway.
I know. But how does that help you be a better counselor? And I used to be, oh my Lord, I think how I was as a young professor, those poor students, they survived me. They even still kind of liked me, but I'm so different now. I try to really approach things. And there's a theory out there. It's called POTS, Person of the Therapist. It's an actual theory I train my students in their internship and practicum years to really teach them we can't get away from we are the person of the therapist. A surgeon has a scalpel that you want to keep sharp, right? But we are our instrument. So it really informed how I approached my practice as a clinician and how I approached my job as a professor to train clinicians into the field, first and foremost. And we make our students stay in therapy when they're in the program. It's very hard to sell a craft that you've never had an experience with. So really trying to help them understand, because a lot of them will go, well, Dr. Merriman, nothing's wrong with me. Well, right there, that throws a flag for me, because all of us have something we can work on. Doesn't mean something's wrong with us, but all of us have a place that we can grow and be more self-aware. Isn't that huge, that self-awareness piece? But so we really try to train them into the field to keep themselves in therapy. I still see a therapist. Even if I think there's nothing going on, I'll sit down and go, man, I did not expect all that to come up. Where did that come from? But that's part of walking the walk. Part of being able to be really present with your client is taking care of our business, taking care of the resentments we might have, taking care of whatever guilt and shame is chasing us, because it just does. And those false beliefs, I call them rules they're not our rules. I don't know where that came from, but they will often rule our lives. So really, for me, becoming very honest and helping myself to say, it's okay not to know this. It's okay to be impacted. What's not okay is to not go get some help. I ran a research study maybe in 2007 where I was really looking at compassion fatigue in practitioners. And one thing that came from that study, it was very clear people felt a lot of shame if they felt impacted by compassion fatigue or burnout. And so trying to normalize that impact, because if you look at Charles Figley's work, the fact is, if we're impacted, it's not because we're bad, it's because we're so good at our craft and we're so connected to our clients that we take on their traumas and their things that our body doesn't know the difference. It dumps the hormones. It's like, oh, I've had all kinds of trauma today. But that's where that allostatic load comes in too.
Now, let's say you have a client, they're coming in and they've got a presenting problem, because they're saying, hey, what brings you here? And they tell you about the presenting problem. But then as you're working with them, you're starting to think, okay, I think that's just a symptom of something that's a larger, deeper cause. How do you start to introduce that? And then do you decide ever, because you have a number of modalities that you're experienced in. And so how do you decide okay, with this particular client, they said they came in for X problem, but now I'm realizing I might not only have to shift the focus of what we're working on, but what will probably be most helpful, but also is maybe shift modalities. And how do you start to bridge that conversation with them of saying, hey, I know you came in here, you're saying the presenting problem is this, But I'm starting to think that this other thing is really we're not, even if we solve this symptom, we're not going to, it's just going to pop up for you again. So how do you how do you go through that mentally in your head as you're working with a client of, hey, we might,
Yeah.
because you don't want to insert yourself too much. You want to have their self-determination of what they want to work on. But how are you trying
Yeah.
to decide, maybe we need to shift over here a little
Yeah. Isn't that the fun of our craft? I feel like I'm on this treasure hunt all the time with the like, oh, what about this? I get so excited uh, about various modalities I can bring in. First and foremost, and research backs this up, it's therapeutic alliance.
bit?
I've got to take the time to build a strong alliance with this precious soul that has come to me to open up so that he or she can feel vulnerable and can trust the process. Because and I tell them from the get-go, and I'm sure your state has the same rules. Here in Texas, we have to have an intake process, regardless of what they're coming in for. We have the same intake process. So I always do various, like a PHQ-9, a Bex, a depressive inventory, a GAD, just to kind of give me an idea what they're coming in with. But one of the things as I'm doing that intake process, because that's a very important piece that I think sometimes we skip over, that is where relationship begins. That is where trust begins. So I'm not going to read it to them verbatim because that's boring, but we are going to have a discussion about it's going to get worse before it gets better. And that doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong. That just means that's part of the therapeutic process. It's not this magical, we're going to have one session and woohoo, I feel good. That's we'll have about 3 sessions. Then you'll start to trust me. Then you'll
Right.
start to work on some stuff. And then it's going to feel like, I don't know if I can cuss. Oh, crap.
Yeah,
It's not
say
going to
what you
feel
want to
good.
say here, but yeah.
And it doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong. It means most likely, and I know it sounds sadistic, but I'm not being, I get excited for them when things get a little bit mucky and some feelings start coming up, because that tells me they're really working on some things, and that's okay. But so as I build that therapeutic alliance, it's important they know things could get worse before better, and nothing's guaranteed in therapy. It's a 2-person party. But here's what the point I was trying to make. I'll get there. My 63-year-old brain kind of goes in circles, but here's where I'm going. I want them to know I'm just a tour guide. I don't have all the answers. The answers are within them. And if they trust me, we'll try some things that might get them to some answers. So as I see things coming up, I might invite, I've seen a pattern. You've really mentioned some grief, kind of feels like it might be tied to some childhood things. I'm wondering if you might be open to trying some EMDR and just seeing what might be there. I'm just going to invite that next modality. And it comes, after 30 years, and I'm sure you have it yourself, there's an instinct that just comes up. Our craft is very much science, which are our theories, and instinct, which is us, that after so many times seeing so many different clients, you kind of have a paradigm you can pull from. And everyone's different. No 2 people, I'm not going to do the same thing twice, but I'm just going to invite. I see this going on. I'm wondering if you might be open to trying this. And I'm always open to no, and I let them know. No is always an answer. That's fine. But
Well, one of the things I find I struggle with is when I'm sensing something, like if you walked into a room and on a wall there's a space where you think a picture would normally be hanging, but there's just an emptiness and the paint's a little lighter there. And if I have a client who is not disclosing that they have any history of trauma, but I'm feeling like a trauma spaced hole, and I am, flirting around, and I may say, well, you didn't disclose in our intake or whatnot that you have any experiences around, history of sexual violence or witnessing a deer getting hit by a truck or anything else like that. But I'm just kind of feeling, there's this gap in your memory, or there's this reaction that you're having when we start to try to delve into intimacy or other things like that. And so how do you handle when a client hasn't disclosed something, but all of your spider senses are tingling and they're kind of saying, but then you don't want to push too hard because A, that might not be a door they're ready to walk through, or B, they really might not have anything. And we don't want to be inventing something that isn't there and trying to create a false memory or whatever. So just any thoughts you have about when you experience that kind of feeling, like, gosh, this really feels like there's something trauma shaped there, but I'm not really sure what it is.
yeah. Yeah, and I love that. And that you're right. It's so important we don't create memories for a client that, as I said, well, let me answer the question. I had a story, but I'm going to answer the question. um, it's a very gentle thing. It's a very gentle thing. And sometimes I might go to help me. I have several modalities. I can't see it. I have a box right over here. It's for emotional transformation therapy, which is aligned. It's really fascinating. You sit, your head is in the box, and all these. It's aligned with the chakra colors,
Mm.
and I will probably have them do a full body scan. It's so important they get somatically embodied because we try to stay in our head and just think through all this stuff, and we don't go surface if we're just in our head. And you'll probably notice that we get some really resistant clients that want to bounce back to telling stories, where they're staying right here. I want them to go vertical. I want them to go deep because that's where things lie in our body. So I'm from the very first session, I'm going to talk to them about somatic work and trying to get them, let's do some body scans. Of course, they oftentimes get irritated with me. They're like, I don't want to go in my body. I don't know what you mean, Phil. So, but we just stay patient and sure enough, we'll get to the point where they can say, okay, my chest is kind of tight. I've learned that that's anxiety. So great. So I'll take them into the emotional transformation therapy modality to see if there's something else there. It's amazing what that light, if you have never heard of it, research that. It is a fascinating modality. But if the pattern is every time I've got something tight in my chest, that's going to cue me into, that's why I'm going to bring in chakra psychology. That's a heart chakra. That's something about relationships. That's something that I want to explore a little bit more. I'm thinking in my spidey mind, if you will. So I'll put them on the green light in the box and we'll just, I'll just say, what's your earliest memory around period? What's your earliest memory? I don't know if you've ever used that question. That's fascinating where
Mhm.
that often gets so much information that, that intake paperwork does not. They're very guarded as they're doing that intake paperwork. And we only know what they tell us to work with, right? So I'm going to do something with ETT, see if that gets them somewhere. Maybe I move into bioenergetics and try and get them to move some energies by just moving their body as we're talking. That's fascinating too, to get people up off their butt and moving as they're talking to you. And I have the privilege of living out here on this ranch. I've got 1,000 acres that nobody is around, that I can take them out to my horses and they can pet the horses. And I mean, we're moving and we're talking and trying to get those defenses down in a very honest way. I let them, I'm not tricking them. I'm telling them, I think I'd like to try this because I'm feeling some resistance as we're talking about that. I'll be very gestalt with them. Here's what I'm feeling. I'm wondering, would you be open to? And we, would try some different modalities. And that's my invitation to any of my students or any therapists that I'm training with. Have some tools that we can invite clients into. And if one isn't working, let's try this and see if that works. But so that's where I would start.
Now, when you get, it sounds like you're always researching and learning about new tools. And how do you make that determination, though? Like, I feel like one of those, bands that's been out there for a long time, and some people just want to hear the hits, and then you've got a new song. So, how are you deciding, like, what your comfort level is when you're ready to put this new, like, so maybe you went to a seminar and you did whatever, and you're like, I want to start trying to work a little bit more with some of my clients, but I also want to do I don't want to do a disservice to them because I know I can play the hits and help this person. But I also want to explore and build my capacity with some of the new tools that I'm learning about. So, and I'm guessing with certain clients, obviously you inform them, you say, hey, I've learned recently about this new modality. Would you like to explore this with me? And you've got some that are more game for it. But so how do you kind of make that determination of, like, I want to use this thing that I've been using this other modality for 15, 20, 25 years. But I learned about this new thing. So how do you work that out in your mind of like trying something new with a client or newer to you versus going with something that you're pretty confident in already?
Yeah. And most of what I've talked about are things I've been doing for a long time. So it's been a while. But I mean, I do go to my conferences and like I went to EMDR thing the other day that was really fun.
Mm-hmm.
so fun to combine EMDR and internal family systems. So fun. But I, first and foremost, it's very ethical that I know why I'm introducing that to this client. My client is here. I want to try and get him here as per our treatment plan that we've come up together, not just because Julie, being a mad scientist, tried to come up with something. And sometimes I might say that to them. I've got my lab coat on. I feel like a mad scientist. I'd like to try this. What do you think? And, they'll go, no, Julie, or they'll go, oh, that sounds fun. And that's fine. I have fun with my sessions. I mean, yes, I've run psychiatric units. I've been an on-call suicide therapist. I mean, I didn't go do the suicide. I would end up at the hospital with the clients. I've worked some pretty heavy things over my career. So when I say I have fun in session, I meet the client's energy. If they are not in the mood to have fun, we're not having fun. But I think it goes back to, and as I said, first and foremost, ethically, I have to know why I want to introduce this particular modality in with this client. To move along the treatment plan that we've created together. But I think it really goes back to that therapeutic alliance that we have in place, that they have come to trust me and they trust me enough to know I can easily say no to Julie and it's going to be absolutely fine. Or I can easily try this. And if it doesn't feel right, we'll back off. But if it does, we'll move forward. And I promise you, I have tried things over the years and it bombed. It bombed. I was like, well, that bombed. Yeah. Let's try this,
But yeah, and that bombed with that client at that time. So it's like I always say to them, it's like trying on shoes. Sometimes some things are going to fit and some things are not going to. It doesn't mean it's bad. It's just not a fit right now for this client.
Yes. And I think after so many years, you just have the confidence, because it used to terrify me. I can remember when I was first training in play therapy, I thought, oh, I could never do that. How am I going to make someone do that? And now I have learned that, and I think this is very important for your clients. I'm only human. I don't have all the answers. And I promise I'm going to screw it up sometimes, not on purpose. And we're going to work through it together. I mean, I'll give you that deer in the headlight look and go, okay, let's try this, But I think that builds, I know it's built my confidence in my art, by being just human and going, I don't know, man. Coming at it very authentically. I think that's very important for your clients. This was years ago when I was running a psych unit in Abilene, Texas. No longer there, but but I remember there's 3 colleges right there in Abilene, Texas. So I had some interns from a particular college, and a nurse. We were running group, and a nurse called me out to some kind of crisis was going on. So I left them. Y'all okay? Yeah. I came back in. It was mass chaos. I said, "What in the heck is happening here?" They were trying to fake their the interns were trying to fake it, like, oh, we know just exactly what we're doing. And the residents, the patients called BS on it, and absolutely chaos ensued. And that really, it's just, if you don't know, you don't know. It's okay.
Right, and if you seem insincere, you're not going to make that alliance. So they thrive on that sincerity, because again, they want to know that we're really there with them. And that brings up a question that again, I'll also, especially as I'm doing clinical supervision for people, and I'm sure you experience this a lot, is how helping people define the role of self-disclosure, and whether it's helping clients work through stress or in relationships or things like that. Because again, you're working at this nexus of burnout and stress, and then also with your clients about their sexuality and whatnot. And so how does that role, particularly when we're kind of talking about intimacy, relationships and whatnot, I'm guessing it feels more comfortable and safe to do self-disclosure when we're talking about burnout and compassion fatigue, but it might feel a little bit of a different boundary when you're talking about intimacy, sexuality, and things like that. So how do you start to, what's the lens that you're bringing to self-disclosure, and does it change as you're working through with these different kinds of topics?
Right. Self-disclosure is a very, it's a seasoning that we use very sparsely. I mean, again, just like if you're using a particular technique, ethically, you need to know why. If you're going to self-disclose, ethically, you need to know, why am I saying this self-disclosure? How is this helping this client? Not, smoking a cigarette and just talking about you the whole session.
Yeah.
That's not okay. But there are times where just a little seasoning of self-disclosure very much helps that client relax a little bit
Mhm.
and think, okay, maybe I can trust this person. But you have to know why you're doing it. That's something I spend a lot of time on. Oh my Lord, how many videos have I reviewed for students over the years? We spend a lot of time on appropriate self-disclosure and not appropriate. And again, there's an intuition, right? There's a spidey sense, as you said, that comes up. But I think truly the boundary is probably similar. It really lies in the seat of being completely comfortable with yourself. As I said, the research project I conducted really showed that people had a lot of shame and embarrassment around feeling impacted by burnout or compassion fatigue, like they had done something wrong. So they were trying to hide it and not seek supervision and feel better about it. So there's that. Now, with sexuality, we are sexual beings. That's the most natural thing on earth, however you slice and dice it. And I spend a lot of time with students, and I have, these are grad students. They age from 23 to 63, there's the whole range. And I've done a ton of marriage counseling. It has always surprised me how uncomfortable people are with their sexuality, how much shame has come along with them in their sexuality. So we spend a lot of time. I might have them do a sex timeline, meaning, we look at our money story. What did I learn about money? Where did I learn about money? Same thing about sex. What did you learn? Where did you learn? Is there something in your DNA you're bringing forward that you're not aware of? What kind of messages did you get about sex? Which is very important for a counselor in training to know, because when someone comes in needing to talk about it, they're going to feel if you're embarrassed or you pull back from that conversation. So the boundary would be appropriateness, not us pushing it on the client, us being open to receive and normalize and hold space for that client with whatever they need to talk about.
When you're advising and doing supervision for young clinicians, and they are in clinical situations where it's opposite sex or it's same sex, but their client is same sex oriented or whatnot, and is there a way that you're saying, hey, we've been watching out for transference and countertransference and things like that they may have to approach, especially when we're dealing with sexual intimacy discussions of that kind of thing. And again, so particularly if there is that power dynamic. So for like male clinicians working with heterosexual female clients, if they're saying, okay, I'm again feeling that there might be this difficulty around intimacy and sexual intimacy, but not wanting to intrude, not wanting, so,
Right.
okay, but if like, this is a thing that I do think would be appropriate if I was working with, a heterosexual male and as a male therapist, but, again, this idea of, do I not want to bring this thing up, or am I doing a disservice to my client by being too cautious with them? So any guidance
Yeah.
that you would give to young clinicians about that dynamic and how to pay attention for that and setting those appropriate healthy boundaries?
Well, and that's a great question. And I think that that's something that isn't talked about enough in training programs, because look at the number one reason people lose their license:
Hmm.
sleeping with their clients.
Hmm.
So I will open the class going, first and foremost, do not sleep with your client. Just don't do it. There are other places to find,
Right.
someone to date. Don't do it. And we open up and have a conversation about that, because there's some embarrassment, like, oh, and I tell them about a story, and this is it was years ago. I was a young clinician, but this guy came in. My God, he was good looking. He was and I found myself, I was just stumbling. I was like, my God, I can't make a sentence. He's so good looking. And I mean, I tried to I got through the session. Then I went and sought supervision. I was like, oh my Lanta, can I even work with this client? And I teach that to normalize that. There was nothing wrong in that happening. What would have been wrong if I had acted on it? I went and sought supervision
Hmm.
and really got things in perspective, and I was able to work with him, and that was fine. It passed. But I think I think it's important that young clinicians know that they need to seek supervision. There's no shame in that game. we're human and we're going to have feelings come up. That's okay. Now, it's if we are really comfortable with ourselves as if I'm sitting with a man, because I've worked with a cajillion men in my career, or if I'm sitting with a woman or a same-sex woman. I mean,
Same-sex
a woman
oriented.
yes, thank you. They're humans, right? They're just humans. So for us to be able to approach it as it's just a human and we're talking about human things, and I'm not going to interject these thoughts and nuances into it that make it wrong. I've had great success with folks in working on their sexuality without making it about me, without making it something that was naughty, or oh, you can't talk about that with a man. Yeah, you can. It's okay. And sometimes I found my men really appreciated having a woman's opinion, having safety with a woman in that way, help them move through some things that maybe having safety with another man might not have for them, if that makes sense. But I think it really comes back to knowing our boundaries and seeking supervision if we feel something's pushed. That's why there's great supervisors out there, right?
Yeah. I always say the best thing I learned in grad school was a professor who said, when in doubt, consult. If you're afraid to consult, you're probably doing something wrong. So just
it's so true.
So always doing that. The other day I was listening to a podcast and they introduced a new term to me, and it's heteropessimism. And so many women right now are having this feeling that the bar for men is just so low. And so it's this story, and I think a really dangerous story that we're telling ourselves, that you're not like, there aren't really a lot of good men out there. And so and with that, this idea of what are the expectations, so often, and I'm a big fan of narrative therapy, and this idea of what's the story that we're telling ourselves of. So as I move into a marriage, as I move into my career, people saying, well, I hate my job, but of course everyone hates their job. No, everyone doesn't hate their job. Or, again, well, yes, we're not having a lot of sex, but we've been married for 7 years. So of course you're not having a lot of sex, or we've got little kids, or these kinds of things. How do you start to pull out from people, whether it's talking to them about compassion fatigue or talking to them about their expectations for what their sexual life is going to be like? How do you start to pull that out for them and then start to try to combat what their lived experience might be? Their lived experience might be, and what they're hearing from, because people, they love to, I'll never forget when we were interviewing our pediatrician. And, she said, you hear all the horror stories about childbirth, but you notice how many people have more than one kid? So we love to tell the bad stories. And I think nobody wants to hear the story of the person who actually likes their job. Nobody wants to hear the story of the person who actually is having, healthy sexuality in their marriage. But so how do you start to pull out, what people's expectations are and why they're settling and having, whether it's this work pessimism or this this sexuality pessimism? So can you speak a little bit about that?
That's really interesting. And, that really speaks to how our nervous system is wired. That amygdala is scanning for danger at all times. So, of course, we're wired to find danger, something that, tell me the bad stuff. That's that's the interesting stuff. I think it's really important. I'm thinking about my students and I'm thinking about clients. But it's the same. And I love Mark White's narrative therapy. That is one of my favorites, because our whole life is narrated and we don't realize we've got a narrator in there. But I'm really looking for patterns, and under those patterns, I'm being very curious. Is there grief? Is there fear? What are under those patterns? Because a lot of times you have to get under. They might be saying one thing, but you got to go underneath the undercarriage, if you will, to really get to the soft spot where they might be open to talking about things. So all men are terrible, which I brought 2 into the world. They're fabulous, and I'm married to a fabulous one. I've got a bull that's fabulous, but but we really have to man, that's that group think stuff. I really have to watch my students because they'll, especially since technology, back before we had all these darn cell phones, it was a lot easier to teach. But now they will get in these little groups and they'll talk about an assignment. Oh my God, it's terrible. I don't know. And so they get themselves just thinking the world is going to end and then speak as a group. One will come forward and go, well, I'm speaking for the group, Dr. Merriman. I'll say, no, you may not speak for the group. Each one of you need to talk to me individually because not that I'm being mean. I just want a role model for them that they've got themselves all elevated over something that is an absolute non-issue. And when we sit one-on-one and talk about it, they're like, oh, well, Betty said this and Bob said that. And so they get themselves all stirred up. So when you talk about that pessimism, that's what's happening. People, then I want to bring in some good old CBT. Show me the facts. Show me where are the facts here? Because, there's a fact that happens and we create all this drama that creates a thought, that creates the feeling, that creates the action. So I want to really dissect that down for them. Let's really look at this. What are the actual facts we're dealing with? So it's it's not going to be the same with any two people, but I'm going to start by looking at that pattern and then trying to see if we can, for lack of a better word, challenge that pattern. Is it really serving you? Because if you look at it, it's just like saying, I live here in Texas, right on the border. Every Mexican immigrant loves jalapenos. That is BS. They don't.
Yes.
They have their own. Every individual likes what they like. It's that stereotype thing. I think that pessimism stuff is coming across, and I don't think social media helps us at all.
No.
I people. Yeah, that's a whole other podcast.
But that's something that I've been dealing a lot with a lot of my female clients, and even ones as young as in their late teens, because my day job is in high school, all the way up to clients in their 50s, of just dealing with this cycle of body image issues and then lack of comfort with sexual intimacy. And saying like, okay, I struggle to have comfort with sexual intimacy because I'm not liking my body. And dealing with a client just even actually earlier today, we're saying, I think in some ways, though, that might be a self-protective factor of it's protecting you from trying to gain intimacy because you're saying, well, I can't let someone in until I'm in this kind of different body in this different shape. And I said to her, like, the number one thing most couples fight about is money. And it's not because money is really the problem. It's because it's a convenient proxy for us to have conflict. And I said, I wonder for, this individual, are you saying, okay, using that, my body's not good enough yet, is a way of protecting you from having to take a risk emotionally and allowing someone in your world. So how do you negotiate with the clients that you're working with? I can't imagine any of the clients you work with think that or maybe you've got one that thinks they have the totally perfect body, but how does body image and the way the person's feeling about their own body, and how do you help them through how that's impacting their ability to want to feel sensual, sexual, and connected?
Yeah. That's such a good question. And I'm living in a body that was bulimic and anorexic, had my own eating disorder battles back before they even knew what those were. Anyway, but so I've had a war with my body for a lot of years. And that's an unfun place to be. And then you add middle age, and all of a sudden my mom's butt has attached itself to my body. And how did that 80-year-old thing get attached to me? What? It really is a matter. There's so many pieces there. First, there's a kind of radical acceptance you have to get to. I have learned at 63, I am delighted. I can get on my Peloton in the morning and work up a sweat, and my body still operates. My legs are still going. I still have both my feet. I still have my hands. I had breast cancer. My boobs are a different story, but but our body changes. I know I look back at my pictures at 20 when I was at the peak of my eating disorder. My body was gorgeous. What the hell was I thinking? And I've heard a lot of women my age say that. My God, I just didn't realize. So I try to use that as an entrance, especially for my midlife ladies, where I'm like, you're at the peak of you're going to be where you're going to be the rest of your life. To learn to radically accept yourself, your body for how it is a number one goal. But when we're dysregulated, when we're talking all that crap about ourselves, it dysregulates our nervous system. And the first thing that goes offline is pleasure and desire. We're not going to want to reproduce, when we're fleeing from a dinosaur. So really trying to help her understand that desire and libido, they're not gone. They're just buried under years of self-hatred, years of being so ugly to ourselves. Because think about what we say. We will be the ugliest to ourselves. We would never say some things to other people that we say to ourselves. And I really want to talk about self-compassion. Kristen Neff's work out of the University of Texas. She's done some beautiful research on self-compassion. Her website has some great quizzes and such you can take to see how you're handling things. But I don't think we can get past all that self-deprecation until we really understand what self-compassion is and approach things with curiosity instead of judgment. Once we do that and regulate that nervous system, it really feels different to try and approach intimacy and things. My husband, God love him. We've been together close to 35, 40 years, dating. He has watched my body. He's watched me change, and he's precious. He'll say, "You look just like you looked at 20." He's a keeper, but but I think we have to, regardless of the age, because it can happen at 20, it can happen at 60. We have to look at self-compassion, curiosity, and radical acceptance that we have a body that can do so many wonderful things. So
Is
many
there?
wonderful things.
Oh, yeah, yeah, and I mean that's literally what I'm often saying is we have to think of this as our vehicle. And so
Yeah.
I often say, like, when I drive my car through a pothole, I sometimes want to like pet it and say, "Oh, I'm so sorry," but then thinking like really that ownership of it, but I need to think not of the scratches on the car and the things that aren't great about it, but where it can take me. And that's what I'm always trying to
Yeah.
encourage people to say. This body, as you were saying earlier, this body can still get on the Peloton. This body can still go for a hike, can lift your grandchild, can do whichever else, and this body can still have intimacy. This body can still
Right.
take you to places if you're willing to go there. Is there a theme that you're finding, or a couple of themes among the people that you do work with on that, in that sexy after 50, who are saying that say, "I wish I would have known," something that you're telling them that they wish they would have known at 20 or at 30 that would have helped that,
Yeah.
so are there any things that they're giving you feedback wise, that a light bulb going on for them after some of the work that you're doing together?
Absolutely. Their value is not tied to what they do. That people pleaser, that give, give, give. The myth that you can't pour from an empty cup, that is BS. We do it all the time and we become the empty cup. They've learned or they've conditioned their body, their mind to go, go, go. So to even try and stop for 5 minutes to, I don't know, just look at the leaves, they feel like they're going to crawl out of their skin. They are so conditioned to that adrenaline and cortisol cocktail, to keep them going. To try and complete that stress cycle is completely foreign. So they're really having to relearn how to just be in their body. And I tell you, midlife is the time to do it because the estrogen that helped run our brain for so many years and tolerate things, she's gone. And they're like, I am not tolerating this anymore. And they just wish that they could have been more present with their kids, more present with life, because they wake up and they're like, whose life is this? Well, how did I get here? And it's because we've just pushed, trying to accomplish something. They accomplish it, and it's not at all the symphony and symbols that they thought it would be. It's very flat. So that's the biggest thing I see. They wish they hadn't have pushed themselves so hard. They wish they'd been more being, that old cliche human being,
Mm-hmm.
instead of human doing along the way. And trying to relearn how to be at this age is fine. We learned how to do it. It's absolutely amazing. But sure, a lot of them say they wish they'd go back and talk to the 30-year-old self and help her realize that all the stuff you accomplish in the boardroom it's not gonna lead where we think it's gonna lead.
I guess I feel though the compassion for that 30-year-old version of them though, because it's hard for them to know which thing to let go of. And are
I
they,
know.
if
Yeah.
they've got the 2-year-old, or they're doing IVF and they've got a big presentation and a sales thing due, and they're still, again, expecting to be competitive in their, horseback riding or their club volleyball, and so we're trying to maintain these active lives. And that's that hard challenge of what thing, and as I'm trying to help clients navigate all the time, what thing will we let go of a little bit? Because yes, we
Right.
don't want executive vice president to be the thing stenciled on our grave and chiseled in there. That would not be a very satisfying life. And yet,
No.
if we don't do well on that presentation, and that this conditioning that we give to women, that if everyone's not happy with you, you've failed. And how to
Uh,
help them through this idea that the society we've set up is, there's no way a woman can please their boss, their spouse, their friends, their children, all at the same time. There's just not enough hours in the day. So how do you help a person to prioritize and to say, okay, which is the aspect of my life where I'm shooting for a C plus or a B, that I need
yeah.
to be able to accept the not the A plus in everything.
Yeah, that's so funny. I have that conversation with many of my grad students that are having a nervous breakdown. I'm like, you need to make a B in this class. That's all I want to see you do is make a B. And they look at me like I'm crazy. I may be the only one to tell you that, but you need to make a B in this class. And I'm the department chair, so I get to tell the others. But you know, that's really a difficult question to answer because but here's some research I saw recently that fascinated me. I've not put it to the test yet, so I'm just going to throw it out to you. You throw it where you want. But um, I saw that if you will at least 2 or 3 times a week write your eulogy, which I know
Mm.
sounds sadistic, but writing that eulogy can really help clarify what is important to you. Really, and if your nervous system is dysregulated, you're not in a good place to meditate. That frontal cortex is not available. So maybe you do it on a walk, or maybe you do it but to really meditate, really get you into that mindset of this. I'm not playing here. I'm going to meditate a minute, then I'm going to write this eulogy, and you do it on a regular basis. It helps to really discern what is important to me. At the end of the day, what matters? Because we see research again and again on folks on their deathbed saying it's not the boardroom. It's, I wish I had thrown the baseball with my kid in the backyard more. I wish I, even this, I don't know, I'm old enough where we used to dry our sheets on the line outside. My God, they smelled so good. Just those little moments in life that makes up the richness in life. I've been a dean in a university. I've been the chair for a lot of years. I'm telling you, my grandmother always said this. No, my daddy said this to me. I was a dime a dozen, which wasn't, maybe work harder, but you can be replaced at work pretty simply. In fact, I just had an interview to hire a new faculty member today. You can be replaced at work pretty easily. We will hang so much on that job. We cannot be replaced as mom. We cannot be replaced as dad. I mean, others can fill in that role, but not like we can. That wife role, that, what now my kids are in their 40s now. My grandkids are the teenagers. As I look at them, I I really realize this is what's important. It's going to be different for everyone, but I think that eulogy is a place to start. What do you want your legacy to be? What do you want to leave for your family? Or if you don't have kids, for what you consider the important component of your life?
You think about your grandchildren, and we think about a younger generation of women. The way we don't do enough, I think, teaching sex positivity, particularly to young women. And so many women grow up thinking of sex as either something that's transactional or an obligation. I heard this one woman who's a sex expert saying she asked her 8-year-old son if he knew what sex was. And he said, yeah, it's when grown-ups play with each other's bodies to make each other feel good. And I loved that definition.
That's
So
great.
is there anything that you're able to share with your clients to help them reframe sex as part of self-care, as opposed to an obligation? So how are you helping people who may have seen it for a period of a couple decades of just, okay, this is something I do for my husband so that he can be
Right.
satisfied so I can just go to sleep. instead of saying like, no, this can be part of your actual joy of life. This can be play if it hasn't been play since they were,
Oh,
a late teen.
that's absolutely what my book, Are We Gonna Have Sex or What, is about. And my podcast, Sex After 50. Every week I give a little, it's kind of shocking sometimes. I talk about it. I know my granddaughter, I just spent a week with her anyway. She was like, "Oh, Boomby." I'm called Boomby. She's like, "Your new book." And I was like, "What?" We're going to talk about it. Sex is a skill. We were not taught that. We were taught to do you, back when I learned to drive a car back in the 70s, you sat with a driver's ed teacher for so many hours. He'd be smoking a cigarette telling you, do this, Merriman, do that. Well, I was Smith back then, but I mean, it was a skill. I still remember Mr. Thetford, my driver's ed teacher. Keep the traffic moving, Smith. Keep the traffic. So when I'm get on the road, I'm like, I got to keep the traffic moving. But it was a skill we were taught. We had sex ed. It was very transactional. Here's this, here's that. Don't have sex before marriage. It's
Yeah.
was the essence, but it was never taught as a skill. I really try to work with women to understand it's a skill, and you can be very good at it, because a lot of women worry they're not good at oral sex or receiving oral sex, or there's a vulnerability to it that they feel very uncomfortable about. Dysregulate that nervous system, no way you're going to be available for an orgasm.
Right.
So really trying to help them understand this is a skill. You can learn this. You're not behind. You just don't have the information. Most, especially gals my age, I was born in the early 60s. That my mother didn't even talk to me about shaving my legs, let alone sex, So we approach with a lot of shame or embarrassment, or, oh, I should know this, but I don't. When it's a skill you have to learn. And you have to have that nervous system regulated, because yes, years of obligatory sex, faking orgasms, all the things has got our body confused. We just have to get regulated and unearth the desire and libido, because it's still there. It's just been offline for a little while. So helping her get back online is important. I've got all kinds of stuff in the book to do that. But it a regulated nervous system is the best gift you can bring to a bedroom.
Yeah, and I think it's so. And I guess I'm wondering with these clients, and again, you've got this overlap of, if people are stressed out about work and burnout and things like that, those same people would often, almost certainly, not be able to come to a place. I always say the biggest erogenous zone is the brain. And if we don't,
Yeah.
if the brain can't be there and it can't be stimulated because we're bringing so much stress in, then how could we possibly do those other things? So,
Right.
and the other thing, and I think that people need to understand, and particularly women, is that just like our taste buds change over time. And as a young person, I did not like beets. I thought they were disgusting. And then about 10 years ago, I had a beet salad. It was amazing, and it changed. So there may be things that were off the menu for the younger version of yourself. And that every few years we want to taste new foods or taste old foods that we thought we didn't like. And similarly with sexuality, there may be some things that were off the menu for a period of time that maybe we need to re-explore and re-examine. For a lot of women, though, this idea of knowing what their own owner's manual is, saying like, hey, unless you know what you like, you can't be in a good partnership, because your partner may want to please you, but they're not going to know how to do that if you don't know how to please you. And it doesn't matter. They're going to naturally do what they did with other partners, or unfortunately, the main learning experience for most young men now is porn. Well, so
Yep.
unless you can tell them, hey, that's great, but that doesn't work for me. But I get a lot of resistance from some clients of that shame of feeling bad about exploring themselves and learning what their own owner's manual is. So
Right.
are you how do you help to reduce that shame and encourage women to figure out their own owner's manual? Like, how do you
Yeah.
help overcome that resistance?
Well, that is so important. Absolutely important. First, and even in the book, I have some scripts, because I found in marriage counseling, a lot of couples don't even talk about sex. They
Mhm.
might have been having it for 20 years, but have never,
Mhm.
maybe even never seen each other naked, let alone talked about sex. Um, so trying to give them permission to have those conversations is very important. And I highly encourage them to have those conversations dressed and at the coffee, on the sofa or out the park, or where there's not shame and blame and embarrassment involved, just adult conversations. I just did a podcast, I hadn't released yet, but on the clitoris. A lot of women have no idea what all the parts of their clitoris is, let alone having found it or touched it or known the parts that feel the best. So how in the world can we expect a partner to know that? Because no two people are built exactly the same. So if you haven't sat down with him or whoever your partner might be and show them the places that feel really good, it's and vice versa. Knowing your husband's penis, mapping that out. I mean, those pleasure maps are very important, and it goes back to skill. So it's something you're just gonna magically know. You really have to have those conversations and move past. There was in the 70s. I was in high school. I was not a part of this movement, but in the 70s, it really became popular for women to have these retreats with mirrors and really look at their vaginas and understand all the parts. And that's what I encourage my clients to do, because until they can get comfortable with that, it's going to be very challenging to be really comfortable and intimate with your partner, because that hesitancy, that resistance, that shame is going to get in the way. That's a barrier. So to really open up to that vulnerability, back to root. Of course, I am a yoga therapist. I'm old. I've been through a lot of trainings, but and I've got little yoga goats out here. But
I have to interrupt you. I think 25 years from now, a version of you is going to get pretty mad at you now for calling yourself old. So
maybe so. Oh, I've got some miles. You got some
your experience. We'll put it that way.
Yeah. But I like to take my ladies through because if I'm talking about chakra psychology, or if I have my neuroscientist hat on, I'm talking about the vagus nerve. They map through the same parts of your body. I mean, you're really talking about the same thing with just different language. So that root chakra is very important. It's at the base of your spine. Your body has to feel safe for pleasure or desire or being open to intimacy to come online. So really, and if you have been fighting the boardroom, fighting to get kids to soccer practice, making reindeer helmets, bringing the brownies, cooking dinner, getting mom to the doctor. My husband just got through brain cancer, doing, all that. Your system your body, I'm not saying something's going to hurt you. Your body just doesn't feel safe. Your nervous system is very primitive. It does not know the difference that all this adrenaline is being dumped because I'm being chased by a dinosaur or I have missed a meeting. So that's a big part of working with couples, to get their nervous system regulated and get her open to exploring, both partners open to exploring where pleasure lays. And it's not always about intercourse and genitals. A lot of times I tell them, we're not going to go there for a few weeks. First, let's go to there's some nice sex stores in Fort Worth, Texas that are upscale, geared for couples. Go there, get a nice new vibrator, and just practice maybe that on anywhere but your genitals to see where pleasure is. We've been so busy living, we lost sight of where pleasure lives in our body. So that's a big place to start before, you go to the genitals. But also, she's been bracing for a lot of, you're trying to get through stuff. That pelvic floor has been so braced. Genitals don't get the blood flow like they need to perform like they need to. So that's a big part, to get her to relax and not Kegel. Don't we always go do Kegels? Yeah, she's already Kegeled up. She needs to relax. But slowly allowing pleasure to come back online. Just little things like that. Co-regulating is huge. When my husband's real good when I'm getting worked up. I know it's rare, but when I'm getting worked up, he can hold my hands and go, okay, baby, what's going on? And help me co-regulate. But those mirror neurons are available to us through any co-regulation.
Now, maybe the most challenging aspect is, what if you're dealing with a woman who she is ready to listen, but she's married to someone or has a partner who is either, again, they're just not willing to make any change, and they're not wanting to get a divorce. They're not wanting to separate away from this person, but they can't get their partner to partner with them and make any change. They can't get their partner to have the conversation, to start to explore that their
Right.
partner is resistant. Maybe they've got erectile dysfunction, maybe whichever else. And so now you've got a person who is, they're wanting to make change, but they also don't want to separate away. I mean, how do you help clients who are just dealing with that kind of circumstance?
Well, that you've named every marital counseling client I've ever had. I say that tongue in cheek. I'm trained in a modality called discernment counseling. Have you ever heard of it?
No.
It's very interesting. It's 5 sessions. The 5 sessions, at the end of the 5 sessions, the couple decides, I do want to go into marriage counseling. We're going to get a divorce, or we're just going to continue living in this hell that we've been living in. And it's fascinating to me how many people choose to just stay in the hell they've been living in. So, that's going to be the first thing I'm going to invite them to try, discernment counseling. Let's see what's going on here. 9 times out of 10, what's happening, Dan, and I know you've seen this, there's so much resentment that's built up in a marriage where we were just too busy to really maintenance the marriage. You always did XYZ. One of them's keeping a score. The other one is checked out. I think Sue Joyner did a good job in her emotional focus therapy. She's gone now, but Hold Me Tight is the name of the book, and it really shows the 5 dances that partners do with each other. So I'm going to work with them on Hold Me Tight, trying to pinpoint which dance you're in. If you can pinpoint that, you can kind of catch it before and keep from that real big fight that might happen. But we're, at the end of the day, we want to get to the resentment. We want to help each partner feel like they have a voice. They want to be seen and heard. Women want to feel like they're seen and heard. Men want to feel respected, seen and heard. I mean, it's talk to your partner. There may be different things, but that's been a pattern that I've seen over the years. And if we can help them work through that resentment, I call resentment a sacred emotion because we feel so ashamed by it. We've been told, well, you shouldn't feel that way. That's a terrible way to feel. But if we can listen to that resentment, put your hands on your body where you're feeling it and breathe into it and ask, what is it I really need? That's the start of a lot of magical stuff. Because women often feel a lot of resentment because they haven't gotten their needs met because they're meeting everyone else's. And then they think, well, you should know, you're watching me. He's like, hell, I didn't know. I have no idea. So it's very important to really have those deep, hard conversations because those are rich. That's intimacy. That's connection on the other side of those really hard conversations.
Well, now, what can people expect from either of your books or from the different podcasts? So if you want to tell people a little bit more about, so if they're going to tune in or if they're going to pick up one of your books, what might they get from them?
Yeah. Well, In Pursuit of Soul Joy is my journey to burnout and back. I mean, I crashed and burned. Please don't do that. I did everything you shouldn't do. And it's the pathway I found for myself back. So it's very holistic. It's very much about well, in fact, I gave it to my oncologist because I still see my oncologist, and she was like, "Girl, that is a textbook. I mean, I'm very much you're going to read it and then you're going to apply it." Bloom's taxonomy. So there, every week has work to do, but I have had some great feedback on the book. People telling me, "Man, it really changed." One girl said, "Man, it changed my life. She really changed what she was doing and went on to do." She opened her own practice. Anyway, did some things she'd been avoiding doing. But so it's just a path. It's a journey. Are we going to have sex or what? It's really a midlife guide to being re-embodied and feeling fully alive. And it really, I wrote it for couples. You sit down and read it once, but then it's like a cookbook. If things are coming up, there's chapters you can just go pull and look at. Everything from because I do have an aging mother, so yeah, aging parents, going through illness yourself, desire in midlife. One thing I think it's important to say, women, only about 10 to 15% of women at 20 or 50 ever experienced spontaneous desire, waking up like, ooh, I want this. The other 85 to 90% of us, it's responsive desire. And as we get older, that responding takes a wee bit longer. So partners working together to make sure both, are taken care of is important. But I talk about all of that kind of stuff in the book. It's both books are about nervous system regulation. I geek out on that stuff. I like it.
Yeah. And how about on the podcast, and how often are you putting out your podcasts?
Oh yeah. I put my podcast oh dude, I was just I put them out twice a week. So there's
Wow.
so four I know, four in all. And each podcast I cover a very specific topic. Like I just did one on orgasms. I did one on blowjobs. I do them on topics that I think are very relevant. And I just don't think other people are talking about them like we need to talk about them.
Mhm.
But on my compassion fatigue cure, everything has research in it. Everything has somatic and chakra psychology in it, and then I give you an activity. I mean, because I don't think we can sit there and listen. I think we need to get up and move
Mhm.
to learn stuff. So, and on my Friday editions, I give everyone a quick something fun to do on the weekend.
And is the podcast about sexy after 50? Is that one called that, or what's the title for that one?
Yeah, Sexy After 50, improve intimacy and sex by regulating or healing your nervous system. And same thing. And it's just a little research. I love research. I have so much fun preparing those episodes and have learned so much. I found out about this bliss molecule. I found out about all kinds of things. Like so fun. But same thing. I always end with an activity. I try to culminate what we've talked about into an activity at the end.
That's amazing. Well, any final message for our audience that's hearing this about like that, anything that you would encourage them to do as they're just kind of going through life, thinking about their mental health journey, and anything you would encourage people to explore, or misconceptions that you think the biggest misconception that I'm running into is X when in the work that you're doing.
Yeah. Well, two things come to mind. One of the biggest misconceptions I see is that people think just to, oh, I have to be messed up to go to therapy. And that is not true. I think therapy therapy is about growth and just being the best you can possibly be. It's not a scary thing. It's fun, but I think it's important also that people really hold space to receive. We don't often know how to ask for what we need and receive what we need, so that I just would invite everyone to be just be curious about how they are about receiving help or receiving love or receiving compliments, any of the receiving.
Well, Dr. Jules, it has been a pleasure having you on here. And anywhere that people should look if they want to learn more about you and find your books, find your podcasts, where should they go?
Yeah, my website. Everything is linked on my website, and I have a really cool quiz too. I have a quiz if someone wants to find out what kind of burnout is kicking them in the patoot. It's on my website, and I also have a free desire reset guide on my website.
And that website is, if you want to just tell everyone, what's your
Sure. Sorry. www.juliemerrimanphd.com.
Okay. So I hope everyone checks that out. And for everyone else listening, remember, if you have a question for Mariska or for me, email us at dmaiglerlcsw@gmail.com. And until we speak again, do whatever it takes to get you through this world. Remember, you are just not allowed to die.